shorthand term that I have been using about doing something public to expand this, which I have eventually got to do unless I can finally die, if I can keep stalling. But any of you people in other places are just beginning to hear me bringing up and referring to the church, believe me, that is a shorthand term. So if anyone's waiting or fearing that it's been pretty interesting, but you're waiting for me to say that I am Abraham or Jesus reincarnated, it's been done too many times, and I do not like. I don't claim to be a great jazz musician, but I do not like taking other people's music. And so you can count on me not doing that just because too many dunderheads have already done that. So, of course, it could be worse. I may tell you the truth. And then all these other ideals will go nowhere. You'll wish that I had simply said, yes, I am Jesus reincarnated. I personally would not. Well, let's go on with it. Part of what I was doing last week was not simply attacking people, but all of you are going to be forced, when the church phenomenon becomes a reality, all of you to varying degrees are going to be forced into the confrontation of this being something that you do and is not something that you come and listen to. It is not something that you go away, as much as I encourage you to do so. It's not something you go away and write notes to yourself about, or that you go out and have weird thoughts maybe once a month that seems to keep you going. This literally, the few things that I have ever promised you, and there are people here who know it, but I might as well tell you a few of it, because many of you are close enough. The kinds of things that people have always talked about, that life has had people talking about, mystical states and etc. And I have referred it back to, or into, what seems to be a more physical and specific realm of my diagrams and the nervous system, and me taking the world of human anatomy and pushing it into another dimension. But what takes place when you're able to transcend the limits of human development at any given time, you're going to affect everything. It is not simply being able to then wander around and open your mouth and talk in absolute holy parables, or to be able to talk in such a way that no one can understand you. It does not simply affect one circuit. Many of the things that you people think of as being personal problems, that you think of as being stumbling blocks in your way, that you feel that are foibles that in some way that you have either environmentally or genetically, it affects everything. It affects the entire being to the most crude level of having, let's say all your life you've had stomach problems. That seems as safe as any. What I'm telling you is things like that, the old ideas of miracles, the old ideas that holy men, can drink poison, or they can stick snakes down their jockey shorts and nothing will happen. I'll grant you, as always, life lets this go off into very strange areas if it survives long enough. But like everything, you should know by now, or try to remember. Even if you don't know, to try and remember, everything is a reflection of something. I am not about to try and drink acid here, whether I could or not. I'm not going to. I've not told you to, but that is a reflection of something real. I want to go back and point out another basic area that does not simply affect what may appear to be the yellow circuit. It is not simply a mind game. I gave everyone over the last year enough tasks to do, and I've talked about it in various ways, but I'm going to back up and point it out very specifically, and I'm going to change the terminology a little bit to make it sound a little bit more based upon physiology. One of the most important things that all of you but now should know, and you're going to have to just come right up against it when we open the church, is that what seems to be the brain, what I call the yellow circuit, but what seems to be the brain has two stages when it thinks. and I'll steal part of ordinary terminology that they use in neurology, but it doesn't matter. Nobody on this planet knows this. This is just a parenthetical curiosity, but now you should spot all this. We have people who have gone to school for 20 years and have more degrees than I do pairs of socks. Leading experts in neurology, and they don't know this, which is nothing new, because one of the obvious examples I point out, psychology has always studied rats and baboons. And somewhere along the way, while you're still a part-time cynic and critic, somewhere it should strike you, wait, just for a second, it should strike you, not only why don't you study humans, but why don't you study yourself? But that's just but they don't. All right, here it is. It has not been necessary, but this is at the pragmatic heart of all the great teachings about how to be a good person, etc. And that is that there are two stages, just at the ordinary level, that the brain goes through that nobody notices. That is, it fires off something and you apparently thought it. Pictures and/or words. But once you discover this, I've pointed out and I've given you enough examples, and if none of you are aware of this, but now you have definitely been a bigger burden on me than I imagined. That son of a bitch primes itself before it fires. And all you've got to do, as me pointed out, you have the least degree of business being here. You see it, that there you are walking down the street. I've made up examples over and over based upon the way humans operate. Somebody goes by and the brain, I'm just using common terminology, the brain primes itself to make a comment. You can catch it before it fires itself. And you cannot think it, is what it amounts to. And it's not a mind trick, it's not a game, because if you let it fire, no matter how long you heard me talk, you will forever believe that that is you thinking. But now all of you, I'll assume, because I don't want to give myself the blues, I'll assume that all of you have had several occasions that you're just simply aware of the fact that there is a difference. I've described it as being a projector, and it's about to show something on the screen of consciousness, and even though it is going theoretically at the speed of light, that it's as though you can, in midair, grab a scene coming out of the projection room before it hits the screen of your consciousness. You know what this thing was about to think and say, and it's as though you can stop it. It is not a metaphysical dream, it is a physical reality, and nobody ever notices it. The importance of it, I could pick out several, but there's not really anything that's of any more practical importance than this, is to find out that this thing I keep referring to is your hardwired self. It's been called everything imaginable almost throughout history. I just came up with a new description fitting our day and our time. And I have bypassed that, which is no longer of any immediate pertinency, having to do with the erstwhile ideas of religion, and we're all struggling with gods and evil spirits. What we're struggling against is evolution. But it's to discover that no matter what it was called, the thing you always thought was you, the thing that by and large still captures you as being you, is witnessed, by the many, I have a problem, doctor. That there you are and a car flies by and somebody makes a face at you, they give a dirty something to you, or else they just go by, and you being the fine erudite critic you are, it makes some comment. It's about to make some comment about some racial group of people, or they look like that they're probably foreigners. Or look at that, they're all dressed up and they got mud flaps, and you got this car all fixed up, and it's nothing but a 72 Pinto. Ha ha. It's primed that fast, but before that thing fires, before you actually think it, you can stop it. It's not any kind of struggle, it's not any kind of prayer, it's not any kind of meditation. But until you learn that, you do think this is some kind of church because you think I'm preaching. Then some way I'm trying to forgive you. Because if you do not stop it before it jumps from it being primed, like, I know when I've told you over and over, if none of you have tried it, it's very common on phonograph records. Turn up the volume, put the needle right there on the beginning of the LP before the actual tracks start, and just before the music starts, it happens from bleed overs and ghost images on tapes, and then the way they press it. You can hear the first couple of notes, first couple of words of that song. It's a faint, it's like an inverted echo before it happens, and then it starts. That is exactly, that's a prime parallel. That your voice, the thing you've always taken personally, it makes some sarcastic comment, it makes some hostile comment, any kind of comment, and it is primed and it will fire. I don't even want to get into how fast. Let's just say the speed of light. That seems to cover it. And nobody on this planet knows it, except a few people. You cannot let it fire. You're aware of what it said. It is no longer a shock. It's been saying that same kind of shit as long as you've been alive. But until you find out that you can stop it, you will forever take that as being you. You'll forever believe I am infiltrated with the enemy. That no matter what he says, if I am not possessed by evil spirits, I have such negative childhood psychological traumas in me that I will never get anywhere. I've got to deal with this. What is the psychological basis of me always wanting to make a smart comment at somebody that seems to be of Asiatic descent? Or when somebody goes by in an old beat-up car and they're driving real fast. There is nothing to figure out. There's a certain number of people that has got to do that. That is a part of the growth process. You were one of them. If you had not been wired up to make comments about some particular group of people, you'd been wired up to make comments about some other group. You'd have been hostile. You'd been wired up that way towards somebody. And there's nothing to go back and figure out. There's nothing to be forgiven for, and there's nothing to suffer over. But until you find out that that thing is going to run as long as you're alive, more or less. It gets a little better than that, but I didn't want to hold out too great a promise. I want you to apply yourself right here. The thing will prime itself. You hear what it's going to say. What everybody else says, I said. How dare me? I should be too intelligent. I shouldn't do things like that. But it happens so fast. Then all religions are full of. That man is weak, his spirit is weak. You can try to do good, but none of us can do good. Only God can do good. All you can do is try. And the heads of the churches say, I can't do it any better than you can. All we got to do, we can just have faith, do the best we can. When you find out that you can stop that thing from actually firing, then it does become irrelevant. Not because I said so, because you start learning what's going on inside of you that no psychiatrist knows, Freud didn't even imagine. Whoever would be the leading panel of neurosurgeons right now are not aware of that because that's not their business. Now, if they took it and found it of some kind of interest, they could find, I know that much, they'd find some sort of physiological parallel, and then they could go off and discuss it. But there's nothing to discuss. There is no theory. It's right here, and it goes on continually. It is the inner voices, and everyone else takes them as themselves. You always took it as yourself. You either suffered over what it said. Sometimes you could stop it from overtly speaking and making an ass out of yourself or getting your nose mashed around. But still, to varying degrees, you suffered, you felt guilty. You even suffered because you felt as though I'm not brave enough to say what's on my mind. What you find out, that is almost a laughable statement once you say, what's on my mind? Up until the point that you develop your own mind. What was on my mind? I can always be the eternal troublemaker and always go back and say, all right, what's on your mind? Tell me this. What's about to be on your mind? What are you going to say? Well, that's not what's on my mind. The very things that most religions, without me making specific examples, of all the shortcomings of man, and then into the would-be mystical groups, that they all teach, something's wrong. If something wasn't wrong, then the heads of the churches and the groups, wouldn't have a living. Something's wrong, and it's a good thing you found me. Everything that any religion ever called is wrong can be stopped right where I'm telling you, in the privacy of your own skull. is to find out that this thing is firing continually. It is making noise when you're asleep. It's going to make noise until the day you cash in here. It's going to make some kind of noise. You are big enough that I keep at least hinting now. It's not really a matter that's a running battle the rest of your life, that all these insane or irrelevant voices are going on. It's not really that bad, but what I'm telling you, the nervous system is going to make noise. But you can find out that everything that you ever imagined, everything you had ever read, whether you believe it or not, every shortcoming that's ever been picked out by any group, by any person, any prophet, any would-be holy man, and said, here is what we've got to stop. There is where it could have been stopped. Even into overt acts about murder and stealing. When you get in and you find that there is a gap between something being primed, that you can hear what this thing is going to say, going to think, and in turn what seems to be its feelings, if it's passionate enough with this particular scene coming up, that there it is, and it's not some kind of trick. It's not you dealing with the speed of light, which it could be, but once you see it, you can do it continually. It happens, and you cannot let it fire. You're aware of what it was going to do, and you do not think it. It does not reach a real screen of consciousness, and yet you're completely aware of it. And it's no big trick. It's not complicated. Its repertoire is so limited. I mean, at least any of you think, well, if I really get involved with this, I'll be tied up in this kind of hobby the rest of my life, and I want to become a famous, wide-awake, enlightened holy man. I'll be spending the rest of my life trying to catch all these things that this thing thinks. Anybody that believes that, that tells me how much effort you've made. Its repertoire could just about be put down on an index card. But then you're faced with this, once you see it, that little limited number of things has run my whole life. There's the very things that I have felt guilty about all my life, and I just knew that someday I was going to hang around a religious person, or maybe him, and he's going to suddenly turn and say, I know what you do at night in the closet. I know what you've been thinking. And I'll just be ruined. I'll die. Maybe once an hour, maybe once every 30 minutes. For the last 30 years, this thing has been priming and firing that. It is so limited, the repertoire of what people suffer over, what they feel as though is their mistakes, what they feel as though the source of their guilt. Anybody that feels guilty, under any guise, anybody who is suffering, anybody who bemoans the fact that humanity can never know itself, I don't care if the man has on funny hats, robes, and he has millions of followers. Once you see it, you'll know I've told you the truth. If he's suffering, forget it. But if he says, I'm as guilty as you are, and I go at night into the chapel, into the temple, and my heart breaks over the weakness of humanity. Once you get the least glimpse of that, you're going to be astounded that you ever spent any time following around a priest or a rabbi or a holy man. And you'll feel real bad that you ever thought I was one. But I understand, so I'll forgive you. There is no way that anyone who understands anything feels guilty about anything that the system is wired up to do. And the system is wired up to feel guilty. The whole world feels guilty. The whole world suffers. The whole world feels as though I am eons away from being a decent person. They're eons away from being a full-fledged person. Because any idea about being a decent person is just one small area of life's body. And it varies, as all of you should know. You're that well-read, that what's considered to be a decent person in one religion over here is constituted by certain kinds of behavior, and you can move 1,000 miles or sometimes 1,000 feet. And their God said, well, that's not quite it. They all are serving a purpose. It is all part of life's growth structure. If things not going in a straight line, the same way in which your body, if it could be seen in a certain way, you can take isolated instances and say your body is fighting itself. Or you can take the obvious example, once you begin to see it, and say, hey, it seems like this is fighting everything else. In a sense it is, but had it not been for that, humanity would not be trying to fool around with not I. Any of you who thinks this gets too vague at times, you are walking around with this day and night. And I just keep picking out examples that tend to have a certain similarity about sex and hostility and prejudice. But the things in here that fires about you, of how terrible you look, or how you mistreated your mother, or how you've been mistreated, or just a general feeling that I'm just no good. It's coming from this place. It's coming from this place that had nothing to do with any real sense of individuality, because I can play with other people's words, but it's as good as any. To talk about being an individual, there are only a handful of people that from a real viewpoint qualify as being an individual on this planet at any given time. It's not necessarily anybody famous that you would have seen, but it is somebody that some way found out that this thing that primes itself up through my nervous system and fires off, and it seems to make me human as opposed to being a 2x4 or a piece of paper or a dog. This thing, I don't know where it came from. My parents didn't do it to me, not through environmental causes. My teachers didn't do it to me. And then they discover, that's just the first stage, that something really smells. Of course, this doesn't happen the way I'm putting it out in life. It has to go through another process. But then they discover I can separate myself from that, just for small flashes. But they discover I can do it. And then they find out this thing can run, and it's like somebody turned on an air conditioner when I was born, and somebody put my name on that. And I can't find how to turn it off, and the more you realize and understand it, it's irrelevant. It's not a matter of turning it off. That thing is not me, and yet it operates like a human. And then surprise upon surprise, simultaneously, you look around the room and then you look around the planet, and you realize I have fought wars, real and imagined, overt and emotional. I have cried, I have pleaded, I have dreamed of being able to hit it in big time in the Big Apple, be recognized in my field, and I have been dealing with a planet full of air conditioners. There is nowhere I can go be famous. There is nobody to tell me I'm famous. An air conditioner can't tell me, we really approve of what you're doing, don't we? Our panel is going to grant you a medal. We're going to give you, the award of the year. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a hobby. But I have been driven that that's what I was looking for, the approval of other air conditioners. But you understand that they had no more to do with them saying, we like your work, son. You're going to get a good write-up. You'll be the hit of the season. You'll be the toast of the town for a good 6 weeks. That by them saying that is based on no more than if they walk in and they say, what would you like? And the guy starts to say salami. He says, no roast beef. And he doesn't know why. He does not know why. He said, son, I'm a critic. I've got a reputation, and I've seen art before, but in the last season, at least in the last 2 months, I have not seen anything to equal this. The passion of it, the juxtaposition of the tension between modern man's, etc. And for you to understand, that was no more than, give me a, make it a ham and cheese. That's what it amounted to. And I was working, dreaming, down here in Podunk, Georgia, that one day I'd be famous and recognized. All right. I'm going to pull your attention back to this and twist it a little more again. And I have not changed the subject, but I'll go out to publicly available examples. And I'll start off by asking you one of our good churchy questions. Why is it that life continues? It's back up with us, but it's always been there in forms as far back as recorded history goes, but it's back upon us now. that life will have some group of men so vehemently rail against the idea that so-called human flaws might be, that is behavioral flaws, might be genetic. I assume that some of you in here, many of you are as knowledgeable as I am what goes on in the ordinary world, probably more so, but the most recent version of this, I guess, started with that sociobiology idea that came from several people in Harvard, I think. But it's nothing new. It was new terms. They have new data. When I say it's nothing new, it's this conflict is not new, but they now have new maps of it, and the information, the observations is now increased. And it seems to even spawned a new one in the last week. I have heard about a new controversy going on of two well-known people. They said they were well-known. I didn't know who they were. Well, that wasn't the point. I'm just saying the people had credentials. I read about them in a magazine. I wouldn't have known about it. It was enough they made a national magazine, and they were sociologists or psychologists. And it's back on the criminal mind. And this has been around as long as the Caesars were allowing some of the Greeks to write down history. And what little they put in this write-up was enough for me, because I know what the argument is. It is built into humanity, but I want to try and get you to look at it one more time. That is right at the heart of this, and it's not just for you to look at this one example, it's for me to, I keep trying to leave it with you by asking these questions of what's going on. But that is the gist of this book. Is back, they just say now, there's just too much hard data. Checking with twins who have been separated, checking all sorts of up-to-date, scientifically valid ideas that criminal behavior, even though now, I think they said for the last 20 years we thought, everybody accepted it, has to do obviously with the environment. Poverty, prejudice, that it seems now that there is undeniably some genetic link that they're almost, there they say it, there seems to be almost born criminals. And according to the article, they went back and tried to cover their ass because that has been attacked every time it's been brought up. So here's what I was going to ask you. Life has continually, right up until this week, raised the idea that in some way, I'm just picking one area, that things that would be considered human flaws, and by all civilized people, criminal behavior is condemned, and even religiously it's condemned. And so there is this wide notion, cutting a wide swath, to say the least, through life's body, that there's behavior that is flawed, that we would all be better, the individual and all of us would be better if certain behavior did not occur. And I just picked out criminal behavior. Life continually, in one part of its body, raises up the cry that there's such a thing as a criminal. Some of you may remember your undergraduate psychology. I just thought about that. I know somewhere in there they raised up the specter of some guy, I forgot who he was, but I think it was back in the 20s, that went around, he was measuring people's heads all over the world, making a name for himself, and had, 4 billion photographs of criminals, and then he was measuring their heads, all kinds of, things, and he'd come up that there was a typical criminal head, there was a criminal nose, which I'm glad he didn't find me, criminal ears, and he had a small-time reputation. This is the way it's always gone, that the public would hear about and say, yeah, I got a brother, and that first time, or a brother-in-law, and as soon as my sister brought him home, I knew that son of a bitch was going to hold up somebody and get put in jail, and sure enough he did, and he looks like a damn criminal. As soon as this gets widespread enough to have any following, life then raises up another part of its body that speaks out and says, that is insanity of the first level. That is the least scientific notion I have ever heard. There is no proof that in some way there are criminal genes. That is foolishness. And they seem to win the day. That's not the point. But it comes and it goes. Why is it? Rather than just leave it, I'll point out as a hinting mechanism at least, this is another aspect of the master stroke. That a large segment of humanity and by large I am not conditioning that at all, but I just want to say large and let you try and see some of it. A large segment of humanity, some section of life's body, has the absolute belief they are wired up, they've got no choice, and they oftentimes are people in positions of having scientific credentials. But the belief is that anything in humanity, anything and everything in the life of man can be altered, repaired, or rerouted, and that it's got nothing to do with genetics. Can you see, again, what a piece of a masterstroke that is? It's for those that seem to be on the cutting edge of ordinary intellectual wherewithal in the body of life, continually poo-poo, to say the least, and then attempt to just completely, if not disprove, discredit any idea that whatever that group could identify as being a human flaw. Their perception of that group, that religious or cultural group, they say this thing is a flaw. The flaw is not genetic, says this very impressive part of life's body that continues to pop up every time the naysayers, the withal comes up with the idea that, wait a minute, there's some kind of strong causal connection here between genetics and behavior in people. Almost as soon as that begins to be heard in any part of life's body, for thousands of years, this large group rises up, says, no, there is no proof, it can't be proven, and even if it could, it's not right. It's unethical. It can't be. The gods wouldn't do that. That's not the way evolution would work. It's the environment. And part of the master stroke is by God, it always works. It fits. That the very people that they say, all right, wait a minute, there's some genetic link between certain kinds of behavior that we say are flawed. Look at us. We don't have it. And look at us. We came from good middle-class families. We went to Princeton and Harvard and Yale. But look at these people, the ones that become criminals. They're none of my classmates from Yale 72 in jail. It's the environment. Why does life make, I've already told you, such a large segment of humanity so vehemently denounce any idea that genetics are at work in humanity other than the color of your hair and the color of your skin? That anything other than that, no. Because then that leads to anything other than that is open to remedial action. We can fix it. It is a masterstroke. Of course, once some group identifies, all right, here's the problem. This group over here engages in flawed behavior that goes against our culture of norms. What we've got to do is build more schools and help them. Of course, it's too late for this generation, which it is. And of course, it's too late for the guy who just said it, because he's going to die that same generation. But he says, now our Blue Ribbon Committee, and my personal good work, if I may say so, has led us to see that this has to do with absolute environmental clauses, and so all you got to do is build more schools over here. All we've got to do is build more psychiatric hospitals, and we won't have people that are so upset. Because then we can, this next generation will show them how you should raise your children. We'll teach them, don't be so belligerent to your children, don't do this, don't be too permissive, whatever the current feeling is. And then your children won't be as fucked up psychologically as you are. And it all fits, by God, by God. It all fits. Except for this glaring, I hate to bring up reality into another dimension, that this has been, through life's urging, said now for 5,000 years, and nobody notices that things go in a certain way. Nah, but we got it now. I just hate for any of you that think that life does not know what it's doing. And plus, I hate for any of you that think that life still operates like your grandfather believed that God or Jehovah did. That he turns around and sees what's wrong and he says, "Thus saith the Lord, straighten up, dudes." There's nothing to straighten up. And if there was such a person and he did all this or she did all this, once he had it going or she had it going, he would not look back and say, "Oop," because there is no oop. No matter what basis of creation you take from any story, man is an absolute marvel. He has outdone the gods, no matter which story you take. He made the gods mad? Hey, big deal. Look at the progress, if you want to take that story, between living out in the woods naked and having to eat apples to today. And that's on the basis that God got it in for us, and we're paying it off. Hey. It's sure been a terrible time thus far. Or worse yet, if you can see it, or better yet, God made us in His image. Think about that. I'm going to have to start doing some of it again personally. And many of you periodically ask me questions about this, and you know the damn answer. And I can describe it in ways that are unique, such as the channel of consciousness, increasing tempo and temperature, and showing you that what is possible for one person to apparently be themselves or be a particular self is limited. If the heat, the temperature at which they operate stays consistent, that you're the world's dullest singer, you're the world's dullest painter, you're consistent, you might even become popular. Hey, I can read the first 2 sentences in a book, and I know that was written by James Frankel. That's him. Like an EKG going like this. But back to, again, a little more pragmatic. If you do not continually put some kind of jolt into your system, all of you should know this by now. Because you start out, you're expecting me to do it. I'm going to look at you and go, bzz, that something magical is going to happen. Something magical has happened to even keep anybody here long enough to discover that. And I could continue to come around and say, all right, I want you to stop smoking. I want you to give up all soft drinks. I want you to give up sex until further notice. I want you to cut off your mustache. I want you to go dye your hair green. I want you to change jobs. I want you to go get a part-time job at night. I can do that. And I can pick out one that would have the most possible pertinence to you. But notwithstanding me doing that continually, you have got to learn on your own. And all of you, I'll again assume, to make myself feel passably good, that all of you got some suspicion of this. That you cannot continue to come here or read books or to sit down and stare out the window at night and try to think great thoughts and then get up and lead the same fucking life over and over, to feel the same thing over and over, to let this thing prime up and fire the same thing over and over and over and keep waiting. All right, any day now, God's going to jump out of the bushes. He's going to jump out and say, you little rascal, you. I told you, you knew it. If you held on long enough, I'd come and give it to you. Here it is, and that'll be it. Well, I don't tell you that there's no possibility of that happening. Any of you who still believe that, because I don't like to give children the blues. And if it does happen, then justice will be served. We will never see you again, and you'll be off. Although some of us may keep track, maybe someone won't come visit you on visiting day. You can take part of this as a promise and a warning. It may come as early as next week. I may have to do something with all of you. But everybody's got to do that. Nobody's immune from that. That is, on a larger scale, the specter of the church, because that will put a jolt in all of us, whatever guise I use, especially any possibility of me actually opening it as some kind of church of some kind. It will put a jolt in everybody for you to participate. I don't mean just come and hang out, but that will put a jolt in all of it. It'll put a jolt in the way, whether I'm doing it every night or whether I have some of you doing it. I can't come out and present this as a church, me talking about the fucking Pope. You know, that ain't going to... Anybody come in and put up with that, we don't want them anyway. So you understand the presentation, the whole form of it. Something's got to change. It will be a jolt. Every time that any of you ask me, and every time you ask yourself, which many of you do, once you begin to get any glimpses, once you get any feeling of being beyond your own wired system, you know, the feeling is so, the experience is so, the whole thing is just, you know, your question is, hey, assuming I could stand it and not fry myself, how can I bring this back? Why does it just seem to come and go at odd times? I always liked it. I think it's from the Old Testament, something about, or maybe it was Muhammad, who cares, about something like God is impartial toward everybody, except he seems to favor those that are prepared. You should be continually. It's only been a few months ago. I even told you one that you, if nothing else, I didn't force it. I didn't make it as a task. And some of you did take it very seriously, and you got something out of it. But I said such things as like every Saturday, assuming that was your off day, is for a couple of hours. Every week is be somebody different. Go out to a shopping mall. Go out in public. You don't do the same one every week. It's one week, go buy somebody's cowboy boots and a hat and put on a fake Texas accent. Doesn't matter if it's real fake. I mean, that's just as good if it sounds like you're just really faking it. And go out and hang around the mall. Or better yet, go to a Western clothing store for people who really think they are, and go in there and walk in and say, howdy, partners and partnerettes. It's to be, just for 2 hours, to attempt to be that which you are not wired up to be, that which you have never been by any apparent environmental pressures. That you just willfully did it for no reason other than I suggested it, and other than the fact that you should have some feeling of the profit of this. You have got to put jolts into this system. I assure you, no one's immune to it, because you reach a certain level and you begin to operate at that level, and you have to do something about it, or else just stay there, because God is not going to jump out of the bush of anybody who understands anything. If he does such things, if there is such a God as you children want to imagine, and if he does jump out of bushes and picks out those few people like you that's always had weird and disgusting thoughts since you were a child, and therefore you must be selected for great things. Oh, excuse me. If he does jump out, the bad thing is he doesn't understand more than you do, or he wouldn't jump out at you. What kind of God is going to waste his time tracking you? All right, one more, and we're going to let these Kairoot missiles be read since it's been so long. Plus, if anybody really enjoys it, he sent a box full. I just bought enough for tonight. I guess you can make this a task, but I wanted you to, and listen to me, because many, many of you here and in other places, I know this, I can see it, I smell it, I feel it, I can look in your little eyes. I know how it goes. I've had feelings before you got here, some of you have had feelings even since you've been here, that at times you're about to lose your mind. That at times it's a sensation that you're out somewhere, maybe walking the street, and you almost feel like I'm about to lose whatever it is that's holding me together. And at the ordinary level to everybody, they correctly talk about losing your mind because it feels like, wait, this thing is kind of getting mushy, or it's like it's getting foggy. And rather than me knowing who I am and where I'm on the way to and what I'm up to, it's like this whole thing is about to vaporize, and it is frightening, to say the very least. If that happens, I don't know what the hell is going. I won't be anybody. I'll go nuts. Maybe I'll rip off my clothes and set my hair on fire, and I'll wake up 2 months later in a funny ward. All right. Having said that, and some of you having experienced that, this is for those of you who think you can handle this. All of you should have some notion of what I just described. Because if you know how, you can bring it on, which some of you may have to, because not all of you necessarily felt as though at some time in your life you were about to lose your mind. But all of you should have the ability to feel something close to what I've described that is not uncommon. I don't mean for a group here. It's not uncommon out there in the street, your mother and your father. Everybody have had varying degrees of the feeling that this whole thing is about to go, and I don't know where it's going to lead to. But it's just. Those of you that have had memorable times of having that feeling can hear this one way. I'm just all the same description. Those of you who feel as though, well, I've not really had that kind of experience or that much, has never seen that frightening or that strong with me, then you're going to have to tear this apart a little slightly different fashion. Anybody who wants to try this, I won't say that everybody has to, is get out somewhere in a public place. A bar would be a good one. And order yourself a Shirley Temple. But get right there in the midst of them. This is a nice, friendly place. And try and do this willfully. Try and lose the feeling of individuality. It's as though you can let your own sense of I, your own consciousness, and this is nothing that's going to do you any harm now because you can only do it for just split seconds, even willfully. None of you could do it much more than that. But it's as though you can merge your whole sense of consciousness suddenly with the overall flow of whatever's going on. And don't make me describe it. Don't make me put any words on it because that's not even important, but you can suddenly get a feel that you're not some kind of observer, that it's not I and not I. It's suddenly gone, and in a sense, it's the safest thing in the world. Nobody can attack you. Nobody can insult you. And believe it or not, nobody can even beat you up, but that's another story. But it's try and lose the separation. So in a sense, if you want to try it, it's like trying to lose your mind, as some of you people would have thought. It's trying to willfully lose your mind. And don't worry, you can only do it a few seconds, even if it scares you the first time, because it'll snap right back. If it doesn't, be sure and right. Whenever they decide to start letting you have sharp objects again, like pencils. But it's try and willfully, it's to willfully lose this tight-bound sensation that everybody has. Part of being human, part of the necessary growth of life, that here you are, maybe 400 people in the place, most of them, everybody's got a drink, music's going, some people are tapping their foot around you, some people looking kind of like they might like to look for a fight, several people trying to look sexy, people trying to wink at each other, some people look like, what am I doing here? And of course all that's going on, and then of course there's you, and you're watching this. It's suddenly it's like unwrapping a cigar or a mummy. It's try and just pull this thing loose and just try and feel. I'm not going to describe it. I'm about to stop. Just try and feel that you can just suddenly merge into the total flow. You're invulnerable. That ain't the point. It'll give you a whole new sensation. Many of you, what it ordinarily you had thought in the past of what is, I might lose my mind. It might also give you a glimpse of something else. I'm going to have the Chi roots read, but let me, even the people side that's getting this tape. I want to say something else. I'm not even sure. There are things going on in some cities that I don't even have absolute details, or I don't remember them, about who's meeting and hearing these tapes. But those of you in cities that I have known for a while, and you're getting these tapes, and you're meeting on a certain night, all of you together, and you know the rules I had established about eating, and then of everyone trying not to eat on Thursday, solid food, and then everybody meets and brings food. Let me point out again, there seems to be some question about this. This is not the Word of God. And if any of you have problems, continual problems or a periodic problem, if some Thursday you get up and you suddenly feel as though if I don't eat something I'm going to die, is eat something, damn it. If any of you have a continuing problem, and I know that's true. There have been several people in here that had to come and tell me this, but then I smell that periodically, some of you, it strikes you and you don't want to say anything or you just suffer over it. But there's some people that cannot apparently deal with going without food even one part of a day. If that is true, eat. It's not going to hurt you. You're not going to be an outcast. On the contrary, you got to look after yourself. This is something we try to do. You can look at it more or less as a friendly, somebody remind me to make up a new word for ritual. But it is not something that is of a mechanical, holy nature. If any of you feel that you've got to eat, is eat, and forget about it. Let's have, how about Ben and Barbara read these?